The annual block party was supposed to be one of those neighborhood traditions where everyone comes together, grills some burgers, and pretends to care about each other's lawn maintenance choices. What I didn't expect was my own wife treating it like her personal comedy show, with me as the punchline. We'd been married for 8 years, and somewhere along the way, she developed this habit of cutting me down in public. Not the playful banter that couples do, but genuine attempts to embarrass me in front of other people. Today was different, though. Today she was performing. "Oh, you should see what he wore to our anniversary dinner last month," she announced to a group of neighbors gathered around the Hendersons' new patio set. "I told him to dress nice, and he shows up looking like he's going to coach Little League." The neighbors gave those awkward laughs people make when they're witnessing something uncomfortable but don't know how to escape. I was standing right there, holding 2 plates of potato salad, watching my wife treat our marriage like material for a roast. "Honey, that was a nice restaurant," I said calmly, setting the plates down. "I wore a button-down and slacks. Same outfit you complimented me on last week." She rolled her eyes dramatically. "See? He can't even take a joke. Everything has to be so serious with him." But here's the thing, I wasn't angry. I was observing. Watching her perform this little show, seeing how desperate she was for laughs at my expense, and wondering when exactly my wife had decided that respect was optional in our marriage. The afternoon continued like this. Every conversation became an opportunity for her to share some embarrassing story or make some cutting remark. When our neighbor asked about my promotion at work, she jumped in with, "Oh, he loves telling people about that. It's basically a fancy title for the same job, but don't tell him I said that." When someone complimented the lawn, she said, "I had to practically force him to mow it. He'd rather spend his weekends watching sports and eating chips." Each comment got a little sharper, a little more personal. She was feeding off the attention, the nervous laughter, the way people looked at me with that mixture of pity and secondhand embarrassment. I kept my mouth shut and my expression neutral. Years of dealing with difficult clients had taught me the value of staying calm when someone's trying to provoke a reaction. The more composed I remained, the more desperate her performance became. "You're being awfully quiet," she said, sidling up to me near the beverage table. "What's wrong? Can't handle a little teasing." "I'm just listening," I replied, "learning a lot about what you really think of your husband." She laughed, but it sounded forced now. "You're being dramatic. Everyone knows we're just joking around." But we both knew that wasn't true. This wasn't joking around. This was public humiliation, and she was enjoying every minute of it. The neighbors were starting to look uncomfortable, some of them making excuses to move to other conversations. That's when I noticed her, our neighbor from 2 houses down, the one who always smiled and waved when she was out walking her dog. She was watching the whole thing unfold with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not pity, not embarrassment, but something else. Something like recognition. My wife was oblivious, still riding high on her performance. She grabbed my arm possessively and announced to no one in particular, "I better go get us some drinks before he starts complaining about being thirsty too." As she walked away toward the coolers, I felt a presence beside me. The neighbor, the one with the dog, had moved closer. "You handle that really well," she said quietly. "Most guys would have lost it by now." I looked at her properly for the first time. She was attractive, sure, but that wasn't what struck me. It was the way she was looking at me, like she saw something my own wife had apparently forgotten existed. "She's just having fun," I said, though the words felt hollow. "Is she?" The neighbor's tone was gentle but direct. Because from where I'm standing, that didn't look like fun for anyone except her. Before I could respond, my wife was heading back, carrying 2 red plastic cups and wearing that satisfied expression she got when she felt like she'd successfully entertained a crowd. She had no idea that her performance had been witnessed by someone who saw it for exactly what it was. The party continued, but something had shifted. I found myself paying attention to different things. The way people's conversations died when we approached. The uncomfortable silences that followed her jokes. The way that neighbor, the one with the dog, kept glancing over at us with that same unreadable expression. My wife, meanwhile, seemed energized by her earlier success. She was already planning her next performance, I could tell, looking around for the next opportunity to turn our marriage into entertainment for the neighbors. What she didn't realize was that her audience was getting tired of the show. 20 minutes later, my wife announced she was going to help herself to the dessert table and maybe grab some more drinks. "Try not to bore anyone while I'm gone," she said with that same forced laugh. Patting my shoulder like I was a child she was leaving with a babysitter. The moment she was out of earshot, the neighbor with the dog approached me again. Up close, I noticed she had this confident way of moving, like someone who knew exactly what she wanted and wasn't afraid to go after it. I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to give me an honest answer, she said, positioning herself so we were facing each other directly. Are you single? The question hit me like a physical force, not because it was inappropriate, but because of how it made me realize what my marriage had become. Here was a woman asking if I was available, while my wife was 50 feet away, probably telling someone else about my latest domestic failure. Married, I said, though the word felt strange in my mouth. 8 years. She nodded, but didn't look surprised. That's what I figured, but I had to ask. See, I've been watching you for months now. The way you handle yourself, the way you treat people with respect even when they don't deserve it. The way you keep your composure when most men would be making a scene. I wasn't sure where this was going, but I wasn't stopping her either. I was hoping you were single because I've been wanting to ask you out. Like, actually ask you out. Dinner, conversation, the chance to get to know someone who seems to have his priorities straight. The directness of it was refreshing. No games, no hints, no dancing around the subject. Just honest interest from someone who saw something in me that my own wife seemed determined to destroy. That's a hell of a compliment, I said. But like I said, I'm married. I know you are, and I can see how well that's working out for you. Before I could respond, she continued, Look, I'm not trying to break up anyone's marriage, but I am trying to understand how a woman can have a man like you and spend her time making him look small in front of the neighbors. It was a fair question, one I'd been asking myself for the better part of 2 years. She wasn't always like this, I said, though even as I said it, I wondered if that was true or if I'd just been better at ignoring it back then. People don't usually change overnight, she replied. Sometimes we just start paying attention to things we used to overlook. That's when I saw my wife heading back, carrying a plate of brownies and scanning the crowd until her eyes landed on us. Even from a distance, I could see her expression change. The social smile disappeared, replaced by something sharper, more calculating. Incoming, I said quietly. The neighbor followed my gaze and smiled. Not a nervous smile or an apologetic one, but the kind of smile someone wears when they're perfectly comfortable with who they are and what they've just said. My wife approached with that forced casualness people use when they're trying to appear unbothered by something that's clearly bothering them. Well, she said, setting the plate down on the nearby table with more force than necessary. Making new friends? Just talking, I said. About what? The question was directed at me, but her eyes were locked on the neighbor. Actually, the neighbor said, stepping forward slightly. I was just telling your husband what an impressive man you married. The way he handles himself, his composure under pressure. You're a lucky woman. The compliment was delivered with perfect sincerity, but I could hear the subtext. It was a test, seeing how my wife would react to someone praising the man she'd spent the afternoon tearing down. My wife's smile became even more strained. Oh, he has his moments, I suppose. I imagine he has many moments, the neighbor replied smoothly. Must be nice to have someone so stable and respectful, right? My wife said, the word coming out clipped. Stable. That's definitely the word I'd use. The tension was palpable now. 3 people standing in a triangle, each one perfectly aware of what was really being discussed. My wife was realizing that her performance had been witnessed by someone who wasn't buying the act. The neighbor was making it clear that she saw value where my wife saw comedy material, and I was standing between them, understanding for the first time in years what it felt like to have someone see me as something other than a target. Well, my wife said, grabbing my arm with unnecessary force. I think we should probably mingle. Lots of neighbors to catch up with. Of course, the neighbor said. It was nice talking with both of you. Really enlightening. As my wife pulled me away, I caught the neighbor's eye one more time. She gave me a small nod, like she was saying I see you. Not the man your wife wants everyone to think you are, but the man you actually are. The rest of the party felt different after that. Every joke my wife made at my expense, every little dig disguised as playful banter, felt amplified. Because now I knew what it looked like from the outside. Now I had a reference point for what respect actually looked like. And my wife? She seemed to sense that something had shifted, though she couldn't quite put her finger on what. She kept glancing back toward where the neighbor had been, her performance becoming more aggressive, more desperate. What she didn't realize was that the audience she really needed to worry about was the one standing right next to her, the one who was finally paying attention. For the next hour, my wife's behavior escalated. Every conversation became an opportunity to reference our earlier interaction with the neighbor. She made pointed comments about women who don't respect boundaries and inappropriate behavior at family-friendly events. The irony wasn't lost on anyone paying attention. She positioned us near the grill area where most of the neighbors were gathered, essentially creating her own captive audience. That's when she made her mistake. "You know what's funny?" she announced, loud enough for everyone within 20 feet to hear. "Some people come to neighborhood parties thinking they can just walk up to married men and start flirting. Like, seriously? Have some self-respect." The conversation around us stopped. People looked uncomfortable, shifting their weight and suddenly finding their plastic cups very interesting. But my wife wasn't done. "I mean, when you're that obvious about it, it's just embarrassing for everyone involved. Right, honey?" She looked at me expectantly, waiting for me to validate her public attack on our neighbor. That's when I decided I was done being her silent partner in this performance. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the suddenly quiet group, "I think what's embarrassing is spending an entire afternoon trying to humiliate your husband in front of the neighbors." You could have heard a pin drop. My wife's face went through about 3 different expressions in 2 seconds, settling on shocked outrage. "Excuse me. You heard me." I set down my drink and faced her directly. "Every conversation today, every story you've told, every joke you've made has been at my expense. And now you want to attack someone for showing me basic respect." I was not attacking anyone. I was just pointing out that some behavior is inappropriate. Like telling everyone I can't dress myself? Like announcing that my promotion isn't real? Like spending 2 hours making sure every person here knows how little you think of the man you married? The neighbors were starting to back away, creating a wider circle around us. Some looked fascinated by the drama. Others seemed mortified to be witnessing it. But nobody was leaving. "You're being ridiculous," she said, her voice getting higher. "It was just harmless teasing. Everyone knows that. Does everyone know that?" I gestured to the crowd around us. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like everyone's been uncomfortable watching you tear me down all afternoon." I could see some people nodding slightly. Others were looking at the ground, probably remembering their own moments of secondhand embarrassment from earlier. "And you know what the really pathetic part is?" I continued. "A complete stranger showed me more respect in 5 minutes than you've shown me all day. She saw a man worth talking to, worth getting to know, while you've been performing this sad little show about what a disappointment I am." My wife's face was turning red now. That woman was completely out of line, flirting with a married man right in front of his wife. She wasn't flirting. She was being honest. She told me exactly what she thought. No games, no hidden agenda. And you know what she thought? That I was someone worth respecting. Imagine that. The crowd was getting larger now. People from other parts of the party were drifting over, sensing drama. My wife noticed too, and I could see her calculating whether to escalate or retreat. She chose escalation. "So now you're taking her side over your own wife's." I'm taking my own side for the first time in years. And yes, if respecting myself means agreeing with someone who sees value in me instead of comedy material, then absolutely. This is insane. You're making a scene over nothing. I'm making a scene? I almost laughed. You've been making a scene all day? The only difference is that now someone's calling you on it. That's when I noticed the neighbor in question had moved closer to the crowd. She wasn't pushing forward or trying to insert herself, just standing at the edge, watching. When my wife spotted her, her anger shifted into overdrive. "Oh, perfect. Your new girlfriend is here to watch the show." "She's not my girlfriend. She's just someone who treated me like a human being worthy of respect. Something you might want to try sometime." The neighbor stepped forward then, not aggressively, but with purpose. "Actually, I think I should clarify something, since I seem to be part of this conversation." My wife whirled to face her. "You need to stay out of this." "I would, but you keep talking about me." The neighbor's voice was calm, steady. "So let me be clear about what happened. I approached your husband because I've watched him for months being respectful, kind, and patient with people who don't deserve it. I asked if he was single because I was interested in getting to know someone with those qualities better." She paused, looking directly at my wife. "When he told me he was married, I respected that. But I also told him what I saw in him. because sometimes people need to hear that they're valued. How dare you? How dare I what? Treat your husband with respect? See value in someone you spend your time diminishing? Notice that he's a decent man who deserves better than being someone's punchline. The silence that followed was deafening. Every neighbor, every casual observer, every person who'd witnessed my wife's performance earlier was now seeing it called out directly. My wife looked around at the faces surrounding us, finally realizing that her audience wasn't on her side anymore, that her performance had backfired spectacularly. "We're leaving," she said, grabbing my arm. But I didn't move. "Actually," I said, removing her hand from my arm, "I think I'll stay a little longer. Enjoy the party. Maybe have some actual conversations with people who don't think I'm a walking comedy routine." The look she gave me could have melted steel. But for the first time in years, I wasn't intimidated by her anger. I was done being managed, manipulated, and made small for her entertainment. "Fine," she said. "Stay. Make a fool of yourself. But don't expect me to clean up the mess when you come crawling home." She stormed off toward the house, leaving me standing in a circle of neighbors who'd just witnessed 8 years of marriage implode in spectacular fashion. Some looked sympathetic, others seemed relieved that someone had finally said what they'd all been thinking. But the person whose opinion mattered most was standing right there, looking at me with something I hadn't seen in my wife's eyes for years. Respect. I stayed at the block party for another 2 hours. Not to prove a point, but because for the first time in years, I was actually enjoying myself. The neighbors who approached me afterward weren't offering pity or awkward consolation. They were treating me like an adult who'd finally stood up for himself. One of the guys from down the street clapped me on the shoulder and said, "About time, man. We've all been watching that for years, wondering when you were going to say something." Another neighbor, an older woman who'd hosted the party, pulled me aside and said, "That took courage. A lot of marriages don't survive when one person decides the other isn't worth respecting anymore." But it was the neighbor who'd started this whole thing who had the most impact on my evening. She didn't gush or make it dramatic. She just said, "You handled that exactly right. No anger, no insults, just truth." That's rare. When I finally decided to head home, I knew what I was walking into. My wife's car was in the driveway, and every light in the house was on. She was waiting for me, probably planning her counterattack. I found her in the kitchen, sitting at the island with a cup of coffee and that expression she wore when she was preparing for battle. The moment I walked in, she launched, "Are you satisfied? Do you feel good about humiliating me in front of the entire neighborhood?" "I feel good about not letting you humiliate me anymore," I said, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge. "There's a difference. What happened to you today? This isn't like you." "No, today was exactly like me. The real me. The version you've been trying to bury under 8 years of public criticism and private contempt." She stood up, pacing now. "I don't have contempt for you. That's ridiculous." "Really? When's the last time you introduced me to someone without including a joke about my flaws? When's the last time you talked about me to your friends without making me the butt of some story?" She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. Because we both knew she couldn't. "I tease you because we're comfortable with each other. That's what couples do." "No. That's what couples do when they don't respect each other anymore. And I'm done being comfortable with disrespect." "So what? You're going to leave me over a stupid block party?" "I'm going to leave you because of who you've become." The block party just made it impossible to ignore anymore. That stopped her pacing. "Leave me? You're talking about leaving me." "I'm talking about ending a marriage where one person thinks the other exists to be her entertainment. Where I'm supposed to smile while you tear me down and pretend it's affection. You're overreacting. People say things they don't mean when they're trying to be social. For 2 hours, every conversation, every story, every joke at my expense was just being social." She sat back down, and I could see the calculation in her eyes, trying to figure out how to spin this, how to make me the unreasonable one. "Look, maybe I went a little overboard today, but you completely embarrassed me in front of everyone, taking that woman's side, making me look like the villain. You made yourself look like the villain. I just stopped pretending you weren't one." That's a horrible thing to say. It's an honest thing to say. And after today, I'm done saying anything that isn't honest. I walked toward the stairs, but she followed. "Where are you going?" "To pack some things. I'll be staying at my brother's for a while." "You can't be serious. You're going to blow up our marriage over one bad day." I stopped at the bottom of the stairs and turned to face her. This wasn't one bad day. This was 8 years of bad days that I finally stopped making excuses for. We can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can work through whatever problems you think we have. The problem isn't that we fight or have different opinions or need better communication. The problem is that you don't respect me, and you can't counsel someone into respecting their spouse. That's something they either do or they don't. I do respect you. No, you don't. And the proof isn't what happened today. The proof is that you still don't understand why what happened today was wrong. She followed me upstairs, continuing to argue, to justify, to minimize. But I wasn't listening anymore. I was packing a suitcase with the methodical efficiency of someone who'd already made their decision. You're throwing away 8 years because of one conversation with some neighbor you barely know? I'm ending 8 years because of what that conversation made me realize about my own life, about what I've been accepting, about what I deserve. And what exactly do you think you deserve? I stopped packing and looked at her directly. Someone who's proud to be married to me instead of embarrassed by me. Someone who builds me up instead of tearing me down. Someone who sees me as a partner instead of a punchline. I never said I was embarrassed by you. You didn't have to say it. You spent an entire afternoon showing everyone exactly how you feel about your husband. I closed the suitcase and headed for the door. She grabbed my arm, the same possessive grip she'd used at the party. Don't do this. Don't throw away our marriage because you're angry about one stupid party. I removed her hand gently but firmly. I'm not angry about the party. I'm grateful for it. It showed me what I've been missing, what it feels like to be seen as someone worth respecting, by some random woman who doesn't even know you, by someone who looked at me and saw value instead of flaws, who saw strength instead of weakness, who treated me like a man instead of a child she has to manage. I walked down the stairs with her following behind, still talking, still trying to convince me this was an overreaction. But my mind was made up. Had been made up the moment I realized that a stranger's respect felt foreign because I'd forgotten what it was like to receive it at home. At the front door, I turned back one last time. When you figure out why treating your husband with contempt isn't love, call me. Until then, I'll be remembering what it feels like to be around people who actually like me. I walked out to my car, put the suitcase in the trunk, and drove away from 8 years of accepting less than I deserved. In my rearview mirror, I could see her standing in the doorway, probably still trying to figure out how this had become my fault. But I wasn't looking back anymore. I was finally looking forward. 3 days later, I was sitting in a law office downtown, signing papers that would officially end my marriage. My brother had recommended the attorney, a straightforward woman who didn't waste time asking if I was sure about my decision. She took one look at me and said, "You seem like someone who's thought this through." I had. Those 3 days at my brother's place had given me clarity I hadn't felt in years. No walking on eggshells, no bracing for the next cutting remark, no wondering what version of me would be presented to the world that day. Just peace. My phone had been buzzing constantly, text after text from my wife, ranging from angry to pleading to manipulative. The pattern was predictable. First, she tried anger. "You're being childish and dramatic." Then came the bargaining. "I'll change, we can work this out." Finally, the guilt trips. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me?" I didn't respond to any of them. There was nothing left to say. The divorce papers were served on Friday. By Saturday, my phone was ringing nonstop. I let most calls go to voicemail, but when my brother-in-law called, I picked up. "Man, she's been calling everyone in the family, trying to get people on her side," he said, "telling them you had some kind of breakdown at a neighborhood party." What kind of breakdown? According to her, you went crazy, started screaming at her in front of everyone, and stormed off with some other woman. I almost laughed. That's not even close to what happened. I figured, but she's got your mom worried sick. Might want to call her. I called my mother that afternoon. She was concerned, but not panicked, which told me she knew my wife well enough to take her version with a grain of salt. "She says you've been acting different lately, more distant," my mother said carefully. "Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine, Mom. Better than it's been in years, actually." She mentioned another woman. "There's no other woman. There's just me finally remembering that I deserve to be treated with respect by my own wife." My mother was quiet for a moment. "You know, your father and I always wondered about some of the things she'd say about you. At family gatherings, the little comments. We thought maybe it was just her sense of humor." "It wasn't humor, Mom." "No, I'm starting to realize that. The calls to family members backfired on my wife more than she probably expected. Turns out, people had been noticing her behavior for years, but hadn't felt it was their place to say anything. Now that I was taking action, they felt free to share their observations. My cousin called to tell me she'd been cringing at family dinners for the past 3 years. Every story she told about you made you sound like an incompetent child. We kept wondering why you never stood up for yourself. My uncle was more direct. About time you grew a backbone. That woman's been walking all over you since the wedding. But the most interesting development happened the following Tuesday. I was checking my mail at the house, picking up some documents I needed for the attorney, when the neighbor approached me. The one who'd started this whole chain of events. "How are you holding up?" she asked, genuinely concerned. "Better than expected," I said. "Thanks for asking. I heard she's been telling people you left her for me." "Yeah, I heard that too. Sorry you got dragged into this." She shrugged. "I'm not worried about neighborhood gossip. But I wanted you to know that several people have come up to me since the party, thanking me for saying what they'd all been thinking. Really, your wife's behavior wasn't just bothering you. It was making everyone uncomfortable. People were starting to avoid inviting you both to things because they didn't want to watch her tear you down. That hit harder than I expected. Not only had I been accepting disrespect, I'd been allowing it to affect my relationships with other people. The woman across the street told me she stopped having you over for barbecues because she couldn't stand listening to your wife belittle you in front of her kids. I felt a mix of embarrassment and validation. Embarrassment that it had gotten so bad that people were avoiding us. Validation that I wasn't crazy for thinking the behavior was unacceptable. "Anyway," she continued, "I just wanted you to know that you did the right thing. And if you ever want to have that conversation we started at the party, when things settle down, I'd still be interested." She walked away before I could respond, leaving me standing there with my mail and a strange sense of possibility I hadn't felt in years. That evening, my wife showed up at my brother's apartment. I watched through the window as she sat in her car for 20 minutes, probably rehearsing whatever speech she'd prepared. When she finally knocked, I almost didn't answer. "We need to talk," she said when I opened the door. "No, we don't. We need to get divorced. That's what lawyers are for. This is ridiculous. You're throwing away our entire life together because I hurt your feelings at a party. I'm ending a marriage where my feelings don't matter to my wife. Your feelings do matter to me. When? When have my feelings mattered to you? When you were making jokes about my appearance? When you were telling strangers I was incompetent? When you were treating our marriage like comedy material?" She tried a different approach. "Look, I know I can be critical sometimes, but it's only because I want you to be the best version of yourself." "The best version of myself according to who? You? Because the person I am right now, the one who won't tolerate being disrespected, this is the best version of myself I've been in years. You're different. Harder. This isn't who you used to be. You're right. I used to be someone who accepted being treated poorly because I thought that was what marriage required. Now I'm someone who knows better." I started to close the door, but she put her hand out to stop it. "What if I promise to change? What if I go to therapy, work on myself, learn to communicate better? Then you'll be a better person for your next relationship. This one is over. Please don't do this. I love you." "No, you don't. You love having someone to manage, someone to feel superior to, someone who won't fight back when you tear them down. But you don't love me." I closed the door and listened to her cry on the other side for about 10 minutes before she finally left. It should have made me feel guilty, but it didn't. It made me feel free. 2 weeks later, the divorce papers were filed. My wife had stopped calling, stopped showing up, stopped trying to rally family members to her cause. She'd finally realized that this wasn't a negotiation or a phase I was going through. This was me taking my life back. 6 months after the block party that changed everything, I was standing in my new kitchen, making coffee on a Saturday morning without anyone commenting on how I was doing it wrong. The divorce had been finalized 3 weeks earlier. Clean, simple, no drama. My ex-wife had finally stopped fighting it when she realized the neighbors weren't taking her side. The house I'd bought was 3 streets over from our old neighborhood, close enough to maintain friendships I'd rediscovered, far enough to start fresh. My brother had asked why I didn't move across town, get a complete change of scenery. "Because I'm not running from anything anymore," I told him. "This is my neighborhood too." The neighbors had been interesting to watch during the whole process. Some had chosen sides, but most just seemed relieved that the uncomfortable dinner party dynamic was over. The couple next door to my old house told me they'd started having people over again now that they didn't have to worry about witnessing public humiliation disguised as marriage. My ex-wife had moved in with her sister across town. Word was she'd been telling people I'd had a midlife crisis, but fewer people were buying that story as time went on. When you spend years making someone look bad in public, people remember when the truth comes out. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. Through the window, I could see her, the neighbor who'd started this whole transformation with one honest conversation. "Hope you don't mind me stopping by," she said when I opened the door. "I was walking past and saw you were up." "Not at all. Want some coffee?" We sat on my back deck, talking about everything except the obvious elephant in the room. Work, travel plans, the new restaurant downtown. Normal conversation between two adults who respected each other. "Can I ask you something?" she said eventually. "Sure. Do you ever regret it? Standing up for yourself that day?" I thought about it for a moment. I regret waiting so long to do it. But the actual decision? Never. Good. Because I've been wanting to ask you something for months now, but I didn't want to complicate things while you were going through the divorce. I set down my coffee cup and gave her my full attention. "I know this might seem fast, but would you like to have dinner with me? Actual dinner, not neighborhood party small talk." The request was simple, direct, honest. Everything I'd forgotten a relationship could be. "I'd like that," I said. "I'd like that a lot." We made plans for the following weekend. Nothing dramatic, nothing rushed. Just two people who'd seen something in each other worth exploring. After she left, I sat on my deck for another hour, thinking about how different my life looked now. No more bracing for criticism. No more wondering what version of me would be presented to the world. No more accepting disrespect as the price of companionship. My phone buzzed with a text from my brother. "Saw your ex at the grocery store yesterday. She looked miserable." I didn't respond. Her happiness wasn't my responsibility anymore, and her misery wasn't my victory. It was just the natural consequence of treating people poorly until they stop accepting it. That evening, I grilled a steak on my new patio and ate it while watching the sunset. No one criticized my cooking method or suggested I was doing it wrong. No one made jokes about my choice to eat alone or questioned whether I really needed that much food. Just peace. Just respect. Just the life I'd forgotten I deserved. The block party had been 6 months ago, but it felt like a lifetime. The man who'd stood there accepting public humiliation as the price of keeping peace was gone. In his place was someone who understood that respect isn't negotiable, that dignity isn't optional, and that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is stop accepting less than you're worth. I raised my beer to the sunset and smiled. Tomorrow was looking pretty good.
Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.